Together, we will make
FIFA Ultimate Team
great again.
Hello, FUT Tactician here, and welcome to my tutorial on how to play the Guardiola way. Let's kick things off by first of all looking at the formation we'll be using in this tutorial, the 3-4-3. Now, the first thing I want to say about the labelling of formations is that they can cause massive misunderstandings. Let me explain. It could be said that we're going to use a 3-4-3 formation to replicate Guardiola's tactics. But although that's true, it's not really helpful in terms of helping us to understand where our players will be at any given time on the field of play. Here we can see the starting shape that our players will line up in, and the first thing that sticks out is that there are only 3 defenders. But are there? Well, not really. We've all seen football matches where commentators will heap praise on an underdog for coping so well against an ultra-attack-minded top team by supposedly using just 3 defenders. This is an absolute myth. No coach in his right mind would try and combat an aggressive attacking system with just 3 defenders. That's why, when we're defending in a 3-4-3, the shape changes drastically. As you can see on the screen, the 2 wide midfielders drop deep to fill wing-back roles, while the central midfielder also falls back to shield the 3 centre-backs. So when defending, far from having 3 defenders at the back, any team using the 3-4-3 will actually have a defensive unit of at least 5 players. For Guardiola, 5 is the magic number. Throughout his coaching career, he's always looked to defend in 5s and attack in 5s. So it's really important that he had players who were capable of getting up and down the pitch. This is why, a little later in this video, we're also going to pay very close attention to the work rates when selecting players that will enable us to play the Guardiola way. But back to the shape we're going to use and Guardiola's liking for units of 5. On the screen now, we can see what shape a 3-4-3 takes when it's in possession and looking to score goals. Again, the wide midfielders are critical here. When their team has the ball, they push high up the field and link with the wingers and striker to create that magical number of 5 attackers. The reason why this is important is because Guardiola's system relies on attacking an area of the field which he calls the half space. As you can see, the half space is located in the gap between the positions occupied by a fullback and a centre-back in teams that use a traditional back 4. By having 5 attackers, Guardiola's teams can wreak havoc in these half spaces by overloading the opposition's defenders. The left midfielder and left winger can combine to overwhelm the opponent's right back, or the left winger and striker can combine to swamp and confuse the right centre-back. Naturally, the same options are available on the opposite side of the pitch. Understanding this concept is the key to realising why Guardiola's teams are capable of taking the lid of opposing defences so easily. Okay, so we have an understanding of the formation. Now let's take a look at the type of player we're going to need in order to make it all work. These are the teams that I've been using, with the Italian team at the top left being my main squad. Just to be clear, I'm not suggesting that you should go out and buy these exact teams. They're only here to provide a guide for when you go out and build your own squad. So let's look at the team position by position and try to get an idea of what type of player we're looking for. Goalkeepers are pretty much a matter of personal preference, so let's begin with the defence. As centre-back, we're looking for 4 main qualities. 3 of those are no surprise. The ability to defend, pace, and the strength required to manhandle attackers. The 4th quality is passing. We're going to need defenders who are comfortable knocking the ball around between themselves and the central midfielders so that they can buy the time for the wide midfielders to make the transition from defence to attack. It's also useful to have a high attacking work rate for the central defender as this will encourage him to step out of defence and deal with attacking midfielders in much the same way that a CDM would. Moving on to the wide midfielders now, who are, in many ways, the key players in making this system work. Effectively, these players are the Kyle Walker and Alexander Zinchenkos of the team, and so they'll ideally need some kind of defensive ability. But more importantly, these players need to have high or medium defensive work rates to ensure that they track back when playing without the ball. Stats wise, look for players who are good all-rounders and are capable of making a contribution in both the attacking and defensive phases of play. The central midfielders should have contrasting styles. Essentially, one will be the defensive pivot, as Fernandinho is in the Manchester City team, while the other will look to get forward and act as the team's playmaker, a la Kevin De Bruyne. My preference is for the pivot to have medium-high work rates, although you may have to compromise on that, as these types of player are few and far between. He should also be as well-rounded as possible, whereas his midfield partner should have strong attacking stats, but also be capable of making a tackle if required. The wingers are your flair players, the Raheem Sterling and Leroy Sanés of your team. So look for great attacking stats, but also make sure they can pass the ball efficiently, as they will regularly need to funnel play inside so that the half spaces can be attacked. Finally, when choosing your striker, think Sergio Aguero and seek out somebody who's quick, agile, two-footed, capable of linking play with decent passes, and a devastating finisher. Strength is always a bonus, but it's not really essential, as we'll be relying on passing our way through the defence rather than barging through it. Now, let's take a look at the custom tactics that we'll be using. Speed is set to 70, so that our players can quickly transition from their defensive positions to their attacking ones. Passing is a balanced 50, and this allows for decent spacing between the players, whilst also stretching the opponent's defence and creating holes, as we'll see when we come to gameplay clips shortly. Positioning is organised in both build-up play and chance creation, for the simple reason that this system requires discipline rather than improvisation. The slider for passing is set to 65 in chance creation, because we want to make sure our attackers aren't afraid of making runs at and behind the overloaded defenders. Crossing is at 45 to ensure that despite the fact that we won't be using many crosses, players will still attack the penalty area when the ball is moved out wide. Shooting is up at 60 because we're going to rely on creating good chances through exploiting passing triangles and 1-2s rather than simply just hitting hopeful long shots. Defensively, we're going to look to exert lots of pressure high up the field, and this is another key area that needs some explanation. The biggest weakness in this system is its vulnerability to counterattacks. Now, received wisdom says that the best way to defend against counterattacks is to drop the defensive line back towards the penalty area. That, however, is not the way that Guardiola sees things. With his defensive line sitting as high as the halfway line, if Guardiola's opponent wins the ball deep inside their own half, they have to find a way of bypassing 10 Manchester City players before they can even enter City territory. So when you're defending in this system, use teammate contain to pressure the ball carrier, whilst trying to close passing lanes with the player that you're controlling. But, and this is very important, make sure that you don't allow your players to get dragged out of position whilst doing this. The press is as strong as its weakest link, and a skillful opponent will exploit the smallest hole in an attempt to penetrate your half of the pitch, and if they do, you'll be relying on an offside trap and 3 defenders to catch out your opponent. So this is where player skill really comes into it, and if you're not confident in your pressing skills, I'd encourage you to watch some tutorials and practice. However, if you're not that great, don't panic. Along with the offside trap, we do have an extra insurance policy, as we'll see very shortly. Moving on now to player instructions, and hopefully all of these will be self-explanatory. You'll see how they've all been designed to create Guardiola's trademark overloads so that play can be focused on the previously mentioned half spaces. At this point you may want to pause the video as I flick through each player's instructions.
Together, we will make
FIFA Ultimate Team.
great again.
Okay, let's get to the final portion of the tutorial now, where I'll talk you through some clips taken from actual gameplay. Before we do, I want to point out that I've tried to keep my gameplay as simple as possible to demonstrate that skill moves and fancy footwork aren't required to make this system work. They're really just an added bonus if you do happen to have them in your locker. In the first clip, we're going to see just how solid the system's defence is when playing against an opponent who uses slow and deliberate attacking build-up. The midfield supports the defensive back five, and danger is kept to a minimum. Here, the left midfielder is caught out of position, but we still see a solid back four with the left centre-back, Gulam, moving over to cover the wide area. Earlier, I spoke of an extra insurance policy against counter-attacks, and here it is. When I lose the ball, my opponent zips out a quick pass to Willian and it looks like I'm in trouble. But the back three hold play up long enough for me to drag Alan back so that he can form a back four. Again, the danger is averted. And here we have another couple of examples of how easy it is to get numbers back behind the ball when your players aren't all committed to an attack. This clip shows the importance of interplay between the three centre-backs during build-up. It may look like pointless passing around at the back, but in fact I'm buying time for my attackers to get forward. When I lose the ball through what is, let's be honest, terrible attacking play, my opponent hits it forward in hope of launching a counter-attack, but again my three defenders are joined by a midfielder and the danger is seen off. Again, we're going to begin the build-up with deliberate passing around at the back, while the attackers commit themselves forwards. When play reaches the right wing, my opponent realises that his left back is facing a 2-on-1 overload, and so he commits to closing down the ball carrier. This allows time for Sterling to be played into the half space, where he can lay the ball off to Rooney for a simple finish. In this example, we can see how 1-2s can be incredibly effective in moving play up the pitch, and also in capitalising on gaps in the half space. When the ball finds its way to Sterling, he abuses the said half space by laying the ball off, receiving the return pass, and then drilling the ball home. In this clip, we're going to build up patiently again and move forward with 1-2s. The move culminates once again in a striker, this time Dries Mertens, laying the ball off, then dashing into the half space to cap the move with a low-driven finish. Here we see the opponent overcommit with his left back and leave Felipe Anderson alone in the half space. Bernardeschi makes the overlapping run, but this time the keeper makes a great save. Now for an example of how dangerous it is for your opponent to try and launch any kind of counter-attack when your attackers haven't yet transitioned to their defensive positions. Alexandro wins the ball high, Lorenzo Insigne operates in, yep, you guessed it, the half space, and eventually Anderson gets the simplest of tap-ins. Our penultimate clip shows me losing the ball, but then winning it back thanks to the high-pressure tactics. When Alan recycles the ball, it's worked around until Insigne can exploit an overload in the half space and finish the attack with style. We'll finish with a clip that culminated in a rage quit. Again, we see the ball being recycled a couple of times through the sheer amount of attacking players camped in my opponent's half. Bernardeschi and Insigne operate in the you-know-where, and little Lorenzo nails a big finish. So there we have it, how to play the Guardiola way. It's been a fairly long journey, thanks for sticking with me until the end. Hopefully now you can go back into the world of FIFA and claim your reward of being able to play exciting football that leads to lots of goal scoring opportunities. If you want, you can follow me on Twitter @FUT Tactician, and if you enjoyed this tutorial, please leave a thumbs up and maybe even subscribe to my channel. Until next time, remember,
Together, we will make
FIFA Ultimate Team.
great again.